Hi, I'm Susie, Program Specialist with the Sonoma County and Charter SELPA. Welcome to the quick tutorial on our top 10 tips to avoid difficult IEP meetings, otherwise known as promoting collaborative and productive IEP meetings for site administrators. That's right, we're talking to you, principals. Let's get started. First, download this document for your notes. It has all this information from the video and more. First tip, know your role. It makes sense to have site administrators facilitate IEP meetings. Facilitating meetings are a large part of what you do anyway. This way, you can delegate IEP meeting jobs such as note taker, SACE documenter, and timekeeper to other folks so that everyone has an active role. It'll free up the specialists to do what they do best, talk about the student and special education. Keep track of who is doing what before and after the meeting. Many specialists have pre-meetings where they can cover drafts of documents and they can have conversations with parents beforehand. This is a good practice and can promote participation. So you're going to want to check in with them before the IEP to ensure this has happened. And once you're in the meeting, avoid saying things like, "I don't know," when faced with a difficult question or proposition. Instead, say things like, "I'd like to know more about this. Tell me more about how you think it'll help." Or you can say something like, "Our team needs to research this and get back to you." Tip number 2, prepare before the meeting. Again, draft agendas, group norms, and establish realistic timelines based on the meeting's purpose. We know that annuals take far less time, usually, than triennials because of all the reports that are typically shared during triennials. So plan accordingly. Again, check in with specialists to ensure any sort of pre-conversations with parents have happened. Oftentimes, I've heard of site administrators asking educational specialists to go over all these draft documents and reports beforehand. So then the actual meeting can be way more efficient and really get to the most important and salient points of the IEP meeting. Hot tip, meeting agenda can be pre-populated in the notes section in SACE. Request work samples. This can be extremely helpful when comparing the student to their same age peers to really take a look at and target those areas of strength and weakness to really help them understand, to help the team understand the student's needs and prioritize interventions. Okay, here's tip number 3. Make the room comfortable. Here we have a teacher in her classroom where the IEP takes place. Hopefully we have adult-sized chairs because teeny tiny chairs are hard to sit in for a long time. And I know this as a school psychologist who practiced in the preschool department. But here we have the annual meeting agenda posted on the wall. We have the collaborative ground rules in the yellow poster, and we have the students' strengths and challenges where everybody can see it, especially if the table is right there next to all these posters. Be mindful of seating arrangements. Avoid having parents on one side of the table and all the specialists on the other. That can be really intimidating. I love these dry eraser name tents. They are fantastic. Don't assume that parents know everyone at the table just because they may or may not have been providing services for the student. So go ahead and get these. They're reusable. You can have folks write their names and their role. That would be ideal, so that everybody at the table is clear on who the other team members are. And once again, visual aids are your friend. Here we have 2 folks. One is the meeting facilitator and the other one is the note taker as they're taking notes on the posters. You could also have another note taker who's taking notes in SACE. So on the left, we have outcomes for Travis. In the middle, we have the agenda for the student. And then on the right, we have the action plan that really lays out who and what and when the action plans need to be accomplished. Down at the bottom, we have Travis's strengths and challenges. I really like to have everybody in the room go around the table and list at least one strength and one challenge for the student. You could really tie in the student's present levels in a more efficient way by using these visual aids as the meeting goes on. And again, that way everybody feels like they're participating in the meeting if they contribute to the visual aid and the points in the visual aid. Again, visual aids provide that third point reference, which can help take the ownership of the meeting off of the person and onto the process. Visual aids can also include agendas, work samples, ground rules, the projected IEP, which is always a great practice. Then that way everybody can see what's being written in SACE. So there are no surprises and no secrets. You can also use visual aids to do competing pathways chart if your team is writing a behavior intervention plan. You could also include desired outcomes and placement options for students, such as using a pros and cons list for each placement option that's being considered, so that folks are feeling like they're making a really good informed decision as to where the student might be going next. Here we have a closer look at an agenda. Why are meeting agendas important? Well, they encourage pre-planning because different meetings require different agendas. They also provide a roadmap for participants so that they know where the meeting is going and where we've gone. It helps keep the team focused and on task. It allows the opportunity for the facilitator to build agreement. You can see those A's that are circled on the side to the left. That's an indication that the team agreed to each point in the agenda. Establishing agreements early on can really help support and reinforce collaboration throughout the meeting. You can see where they've crossed items off too, and that means that they've completed that item. Again, we're reinforcing productivity and keeping the meeting moving forward. I know it can be really comforting to be sitting in a meeting knowing where you have already finished a process and where you need to go next. Tip number 7, the explicit use of group norms or rules. Are these really necessary? Aren't we all adults here? Well, group norms or rules are established to protect the group from unproductive behaviors from any team member. This could be a parent, this could be a staff person. They serve as an agreement early in the meeting. The facilitator is empowered to enforce the ground rules. Or alternatively, the facilitator may decide to empower the group to state when they believe a ground rule is not being followed. Saying things like, "We agreed earlier that we would stay on task. How are we doing with that so far?" is a nice little check-in with the group if you're feeling like, as the facilitator, maybe a group norm is being pushed. Let's see. Here are some examples of these group norms. In orange, we have the explicit rule, and then in pink, we have examples or embellishments to ensure further understanding. So number 1 is one person talking at a time. Number 2, being courteous and respectful. Number 3, following the agenda. Number 4, be an active listener and participant. Number 5, focus on the student, focus on the future. Number 6, anyone can call for a break or a caucus. And number 7, work together to reach consensus. Tip number 8, be curious. What do I mean by that? Well, basically asking questions carefully and thinking about them ahead of time can really help participants understand the underlying intent of some demands or strong stances that some team members can take. So saying questions like, what is the most important component of this for you? When there is a really large ask and you want to maybe prioritize what is most important. Another question you can ask is, how does this tie into the current situation? That question can be really important if we have folks that keep going back to the past to discuss issues or things that maybe were unsettled a long time ago. Could any of these ideas be combined? That's when you have the situation where you have a lot of different ideas and you're trying to narrow them down so that they can actually be implemented. Another one is, how might this look different for you? If you have a particular something in mind, but maybe it can't go exactly as it looks to a team member because of a certain environment or situation or setting. So thinking about ways it could look different. And then lastly, one question that I really like is, what ideas seem most workable to you? And sometimes I'll frame that question as a school psychologist who has written a behavior intervention plan to a teacher that maybe I've given a lot of suggestions on interventions, but maybe some of the interventions might not necessarily work in that particular classroom. And really, the best interventions are the ones that are implemented with fidelity. And so asking a staff member which of those ideas might seem most workable is getting us to facilitate those interventions that we're hoping to try. Okay, so even some of the most talented team facilitators can end up in a meeting where they get stuck and the meeting isn't progressing as initially everyone had hoped. Here are some tips to keep the meeting moving forward. After each section, ask for input from each team member. Then that way we are increasing participation and engagement. You could also use a parking lot if you have a very highly verbal team member who has a lot of ideas. And maybe some of those ideas are outside of the actual IEP process. So you can have another visual aid, which is a parking lot, where those ideas get written down and perhaps can get discussed at a later time. When emotions arise and when they start getting really intense, it's important to acknowledge what's going on and to focus back on the data. You could also suggest a trial run for any interventions just to sort of see how it works, and then keep track of progress and meet again to go over how that progress has worked or if it hasn't. It's important to have that data to know how to move forward at that point. You could also take a break. Don't forget that at any IEP meeting, you could always just have a caucus, take 5 minutes for folks to catch their breath and recenter and refocus on the tasks at hand. And when all else fails, go ahead and end the meeting and offer to meet again on a later date. When the group is too focused on one issue, you can ask, well, we seem to be spending a lot of time on this, and we have a lot to get through on our agenda. You could also ask the question, well, what you're saying is important, but I'm aware of our time commitments. I wonder if we could share key points to what you were saying. And of course, our last tip is ending the meeting on a high note. Okay, we want to acknowledge the group's hard work. You can review the parking lot issues, you can assign follow-up actions and establish deadlines. You can schedule meeting continuation if that's necessary. Ask for feedback. Some people call it pluses and deltas. Or you can ask for final thoughts on the meeting about how it went, and then ultimately thank everybody for their participation. I know some meetings can be really, really hard to get through, but by following these tips, they're bound to be run really well, and we hope they go smoothly for you. And don't forget, you can always contact us here at the Sonoma County SELPA if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.